Philip Zimbardo's famous Stanford Prison Experiment is outlined in the article titled "A Study of Prisoners and Guards in a Simulated Prison." This empirical study took place in the basement of Stanford University's Psychology Building in 1971. The team of social psychologists worked together to construct a mock prison in which there were 3 cells, a prison yard, as well as a wing for the guards. The goal behind the study was to make a mock prison as realistic as possible in order to study the typical aggressive relationship between guards, persons of authority, and prisoners, people being controlled. The experiment was funded by the Naval Research Office, who wanted to better understand the aggression and relationship when people are given power over others, in hopes of eliminating similar conditions that may occur during naval training. Aside from the naval research being conducted, Zimbardo and his team wanted to better understand how prison violence is due to innate personalities. Zimbardo had access to the statistical evidence that prisons do not deter future crimes via punishment, but rather the recidivism rate at the time of the experiment was 75%. In order to better understand recidivism, it is important to note that this is the occurrence of inmates leaving prison and later returning due to a new conviction. The methods under which this study was performed are relatively straightforward. Because Zimbardo and his team wanted to observe the patterns of behavior which resulted due to the experiment, the guards and prisoners were constantly monitored. Monitoring was done by video recording, audio recording, and direct observation from the warden and superintendent, whom were the author and student research assistant. In terms of participants, it is important to note that there were 22 subjects in total who were then divided into 2 groups, half guards and half prisoners. The study consisted of only college-aged men who responded to a newspaper ad advertising $15 a day to be part of a mock prison experiment. The maximum amount of time that anyone could be spent in the prison was 2 weeks, due to ethical reasons which stated that men could not be held for an indefinite amount of time. Mandatory orientation was given to the guards in which the rules stated that they could not be threatening or punishing to the prisoners in any way, nor condone or any homosexual or racist behaviors. The guidelines were extremely vague, essentially giving the guards maximum power. The only specified instruction stated, quote, "Maintain the reasonable degree of order within the prison necessary for its effective functioning." The day before the study began, 1 volunteer dropped out, therefore resulting in a group of 21 consisting of 11 guards and 10 prisoners. It was also disclosed to the participants that they could leave at any time during the experiment by attending a parole hearing and then waiting until the judge determined the verdict. The consequence of anyone dropping out of the study was that they would not receive any of the money promised to them for participating in the experiment. Only after 6 days of observation in the prison, Zimbardo and his team made the call that they would terminate the experiment early. The overarching reason being that guards were classified as hostile and dehumanizing, rather than simply the aggressive behaviors they hypothesized to exist. Prisoners immediately took on a passive role in the experiment, even though they often outnumbered the guards on shift duty and were therefore directly controlled and affected by the guards' power over them. The most dramatic impact on the participants was the reaction of 5 prisoners who had to be released due to extreme depression, anxiety, crying, and rage. In particular, the 5th prisoner was released due to a psychosomatic rash. Upon being informed that the experiment was ending early, most of the guards were upset that their experiment was ending because they enjoyed their role so much and failed to realize the aggression they were portraying and inflicting verbally upon the prisoners. One of the most noteworthy results in terms of the guards' behavior was that when they thought they weren't being watched, their behavior was more aggressive than usual and involved a significant level of harassment. In conclusion, this experiment was highly regarded as the most unethical experiment in psychological history. The guards were intentionally given minimal guidelines and were rarely told by the warden or superintendent to cease their behavior, therefore warranting an environment filled with harassment. Although the guards exhibited tyrannous behavior and acted without regard for the prisoners' emotions or well-being throughout the entire study, they simply stated that they were playing the role that they were assigned. Overall, it was deemed by real prison personnel that due to the lack of racial variety and homosexuality within that stimulation, the mock prison was relatively minimal compared to that of a real prison. Although this was the consensus, still in those 6 days of the experiment, the prisoners were so psychologically affected that this led us to question how damaging prison life is to actual prisoners. Throughout the experiment, it was very clear that social status and their aversion of power led to the conclusion that a group of people overpowering another can be easily taken out of hand. A superiority complex being developed between individuals exacerbates innate aggressive personality characteristics. Personality does in fact control the actions of people in power over those who have no power.